Your angst is your liberation. Men's groups have been the thing more than anything else that actually changed my life. The point is that men are in some kind of pain, and most of us men are taught to hold all that pain inside and never talk about it or share it. So actually going towards our discomfort and pain is often the actual route to freedom.
To Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where people share timeless ideas. I'm your host, Wisdom Okwesbo. In every episode, we dive into the philosophies, quotes, points, and life lessons that shape how we live, think, and grow. No matter where you are in life, this show is here to remind you wisdom is everywhere and it's always relatable most of the times. Today on Relatable Wisdom, we're joined by Jason Lange, the men's embodiment coach and transformational guide. From loneliness to deep connection, Jason's journey through men's work and group healing as we define what it means to live with purpose. He's here to share quotes that changed everything for him. Let's start. Can you tell us your name and what's your favorite quote?
Yeah, so my name's Jason Lange, and the quote I want to share tonight is actually the quote I kind of run my men's community around, and it's the simple idea that every man should be in a men's group. And it really points to this idea of something I lead for men, something I'm in myself, in my own life, of men's groups, which are a type of community men can cultivate with each other to really transform our lives, our presence, and how we're showing up in the world.
Just to be clear, what's the quote again? Every man should be in a men's group. Is that the quote?
Yeah, that's a quote I use that I tell everybody that is kind of a mission statement of mine in a particular way. That's one of my favorite ones. I have other quotes from, other people, if that's something you're interested in. One of my other favorites is, your angst is your liberation, which comes from a Zen teacher I worked with, which is about our willingness to turn toward emotional discomfort or worry and actually sit with it often is what opens us up to profound transformation and a different ability to be present in the world that then actually shapes a lot of the work I tend to do with men.
Yeah. You said the quotes. Can you say it again? Because I heard it, but I wasn't exactly sure what I heard the first time.
Yeah. So I've said 2 quotes so far. One is, every man should be in a men's group. And the second is, your angst is your liberation.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that our angst, our anxiety, oftentimes by default, we want to get away from it and try to not feel it or avoid it. And from this Zen teacher, his name was Junpo Roshi, he was actually orienting towards, no, don't try to get away from it. Get really intimate and present to it. And oftentimes our willingness to go towards that discomfort can be the very thing that completely frees us and changes us in our lives.
Yeah. You talk about every man should be in a men's group. When did you, you say it's your mission statement, it's one of the quotes you share with people. When did you come to this realization, this mission statement? How far back? And what led to it?
Yeah, I started in my own personal journey, and I got into my first men's group in 2006. And so it's been almost 20 years, which is kind of wild to consider. That I've been doing men's work. And I was in it just personally for my own development. I was in my mid-20s and I was pretty lost and pretty stuck. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of numbness in my body. I wasn't clear on my direction in life. I was really uncomfortable relating to the opposite sex, and I felt stuck. I'd never really had strong masculine guidance in my life. My father was kind of able to provide for me, but he wasn't able to be present for me. And so I had to kind of discover this stuff later in life. And I did a lot of things, right? I did therapies, I did different transformational programs, I've done plant medicines, and men's groups have been the thing more than anything else that actually changed my life. Cultivating some really deep, powerful connections with other men who are driven in their lives to become the most whole, effective versions of themselves they can be in the world. So I got into that in my and then it wasn't until probably about 12 years later that I had been doing my own group so much that I was just talking about it to everyone I knew. It's like, I'm in this group, we meet every other week, it's been amazing. It's helped me through some massive life challenges. And then I had guys starting to ask me, hey, can I come to your group? Like, that sounds amazing. I don't have anything like that. And literally where I was meeting, I was living in Los Angeles at the time. One of the guys in my group was a therapist. So he had a small office and we would meet in there. But there wasn't room for more than 8 guys. And so it was around 2017 that I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll start leading groups. And I started leading them out of my living room, giving other men an opportunity to experience them. And I liked that so much. And I saw the impact it was having on my life, my friends' lives, and then the lives of men I was working with. And it started to become really clear in this day and age where a lot of men are feeling really isolated, really depressed, get really stuck. A big part of what they're missing is connection and community with other men who aren't going to shame them or make fun of them or knock them down, but actually support them in building the life they want to build.
Yeah. Can you share specific stories where being a part of a men's group has kind of like helped you kind of overcome?
Yeah, it's helped me in some pretty huge transitions in my life. The first of which was in my 20s there to move across the country and pursue a passion, going to LA and working on becoming a filmmaker and creating a whole bunch of art that I'd always wanted to do, but I was kind of scared to do. My men's group really guided me towards, hey, if you leave that on your, hey, I want to do that, but I'm never actually going to do it list, you're going to regret it, right? So now's the time. If you want to do this, you actually have to get out there and do it. And so I moved out there for 14 years and had a wonderful experience creating and learning about myself and making amazing art. And then as I got out there, I started another group, and that group helped me transition through some pretty intense relationships I was having. It was with the support of that group. I got married. I had my first daughter. Now I've had my second son. Being part of men's groups with other men who are fathers, particularly fathers who are a little farther along on the path than me, has been incredibly meaningful and helpful. Because, when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. There's suddenly have this baby. And it's like, having older, wise men say, hey, yeah, I've been there. I know how overwhelming it is. I know how scary it is. Here's what worked in my family. Maybe that'll work in your family. Completely helped me change things. And it's helped me probably in more of a general sense, become more connected and aware of myself.
Wow.
So really understanding what I'm feeling and what I'm wanting, that capacity has developed from being in a group of men who are willing to lovingly reflect what they're seeing in me and how I'm showing up in the world.
Okay. Yeah. You two major instances. When you're in your 20s, you took that major step, even though you had this thing in your to-do list, more like never to-do list, or you switched it from the never to-do list to the actually doing it. And then when you got married and get birth to your daughter, it was kind of like it was a major milestone for you. Like it was not like anything you've ever done in your life, and it kind of like helped you navigate that situation. And for me now, the question I want to ask now is, I want to flip it around. Now, how has, you lead a men's group, how has that kind of like impacted other men? Can you like share some, I know you can't go into details because of, confidentiality, but can you like share? Let's take a quick pause. If you're enjoying this conversation and want more thought-provoking ideas straight to your inbox, join the Relatable Wisdom email list. It's free, quick, and filled with bite-sized insights, inspiring quotes, and behind-the-scenes reflections from our guests. Just head to relatablewisdom.com/join. That is relatablewisdom.com/join. Or tap the link in the show notes. And hey, subscribing to the podcast helps more than you think, and it's free. So if you haven't already, hit that follow button wherever you're listening. All right, let's get back to the conversation. What are the top examples of some stories of other persons that have helped?
Yeah, so a lot of men who end up coming to me have a similar experience of they're in some kind of deep pain. So either they have lost a relationship or can't find one, their spouse or their wife left them, and they feel pretty lost as to like, I don't know what happened. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. Or they lose a job, which can be really intense, and they're having a hard time finding direction and employment in their life. Sometimes it's men who have a major health crisis or challenge, right? They have a heart attack or they almost die, or they need to make some kind of massive adjustment and shift. There's lots of different things. Addictions can be a really big one. Guys who are addicted to porn, to alcohol, to weed increasingly these days. The point is that men are in some kind of pain, and most of us men are taught to hold all that pain inside and never talk about it or share it, because you got to be a tough man who doesn't get vulnerable, doesn't show weakness, and never talks about what's going on inside of him. And that creates deep, deep loneliness and a lot of pain, more pain for men. And so, the stats are pretty crazy here in the States and a couple other big countries as well, where it's 80% of suicides are men, because we hold all this pain inside and we don't know how to deal with it or talk to anyone about it. And that causes a lot of suffering. So I get a lot of men who come into a group, sometimes not trusting other men because they were hurt or bullied by men, or their fathers were abusive or just never around. And so they come into the group and they learn that, hey, other men can be trustable. Not all men, but the kind of men that show up in these groups can be trustable. And they start to get to share what's happening inside. Sometimes where they're struggling, sometimes where they feel shame, like, oh, I did something wrong and I'm not deserving of X, Y, or Z. And when they share it, they're transformed. Because suddenly it's, oh my God, this thing I thought made me the worst person in the world. Turns out other people deal with that problem too, or have their own versions of it. So I've seen guys who have literally held things they were ashamed of in their hearts for decades, thinking they could never tell anyone about it. And they bring it forward in a group, and suddenly their whole bodies change. Life force comes back to them. They feel so much lighter, so much freer. There's hope for them again. I've had other guys in groups who, let's just say, would often get themselves in pretty unhealthy relationships with partners who were taking advantage of them, or not being kind to them, or cheating on them because they were so afraid of being alone. They would rather be with anybody, even if that person didn't treat them well. And they come into a group, suddenly there's a bunch of guys that care about them, who they can start to get some attention and love and care for. And it becomes a lot easier for them to become more discerning in who they're dating and actually start to set some boundaries. I've had other guys who were on the verge of burnout, just grinding through life, pushing themselves so hard, because that's what you're supposed to do, work more, make more money. And their bodies are falling apart, and they come into a group and people basically say, you got to stop or you're going to kill, you're going to die. And they stop. I had another guy who came from overseas, and he had been in the States for 30 years, and he had never asked for a vacation in his job once.
Wow.
30 years. But he came into a group and we told him, hey, what's the point of working so hard if you're not going to enjoy your life? And so he went to his employers and he's like, I need a vacation. And he flew home for a month and saw some friends and family he hadn't seen for a long time, and came back so much more joyful and happy. So, it tends to boil down to some of the big things around sex and relationships, health and well-being, money and work are kind of the big things a lot of men struggle with. And they come into the group and they can be heard, they can get support, they can get counsel to help them make the right decisions to keep their lives on track.
I love the list of testimonials, kind of like case studies and stories. So I guess the question I want to ask now is: has there ever been a time where you've had to adapt or kind of change the quotes to fit the context of the story?
That's a good question. With those two in particular, no. I would say those are pretty straightforward. What I would say is, I've had to change over the years, and my understanding of those quotes has deepened in terms of really seeing the impact of how they can both really work together, frankly, to completely change and power men's lives. There's been other quotes I was probably interested in over the years. I can't even frankly remember them at this moment, but those are two of the big ones that, I really tend to both teach men and embody myself.
Yeah. I'm curious regarding the second quote, right? You talk about we have to let our angst go to
it's a pathway to our liberation.
Yeah, it's a pathway to our liberation.
So actually going towards our discomfort and pain is often the actual route to freedom.
Yeah. Can you? I guess I get what it means, but I'd love for you to illustrate with a story, probably your story or the client's story, either way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this would be a common one where, let's say for me, I might be scared about something with my kids or in my relationship. There was a time when my daughter was born, and turns out she's totally deaf. And we didn't, know when she was born. It took a month or two. And when we discovered, it brought up a tremendous amount of fear in me of what's her life going to be like, right? If she can't hear, if she can't participate in kind of spoken language in society. And so old me from a few decades ago would have, in my case, primarily turned to like porn when I was feeling anxious and tried to get away from the fear of those feelings. And it would often not actually address the fear. It would just give me a little temporary relief, and then it would come right back. But with this kind of quote, the idea is, well, instead of hoping or pretending this would be different, or trying to get rid of this feeling, what would it mean to actually sit with the fear, to become present and not hide it, to talk to my wife about it, to talk to the appropriate specialists and friends and family and say, yeah, hey, here's this thing. I'm not scared of it. And that tended to free something up in me. Other things I found, in my journey would be, this is kind of more the shadow work side of things of, there's something about, let's say, a person. These are guys I've known in the past that I don't like. I get super annoyed when I'm around this person, right? And normally I'd want to avoid that person, right? Because when I'm around them, it annoys me. The pathway to this would be, well, what's going on there, right? Instead of pretending or trying to get away from that, let me look at, why is it I'm so annoyed by this person? Maybe it's a person who talks a lot. It's a simple example of stuff I've had to deal with. I'm like, okay, why don't I like that person? And as I sit with the angst of that, what I understand is I'm actually triggered by them talking a lot, because I don't feel confident to speak my truth all the time, right? So I'm actually jealous of that person, how much they easily speak their truth. And so by sitting with the angst and going deeper, I actually see it's not this guy that's the problem, it's me. And I have control over that. So, my job is to just use my voice more, and then I won't feel so intimidated by him or whatever that might be.
Yeah. I mean, we have to practice, we have to get into the...
Yeah, exactly.
I like the fact that you said that we have to let go of the angst, because previously in an episode, I guess said that we have to do these scary things in order for us to grow. And everything's just kind of tying together, and that's itself, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's another example of, right, if something scares us, rather than trying to avoid it, we move towards it, and we actually become more intimate with it. And then we become free of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, well, before... do you have anything peculiar you would love to say to my listeners right now? Like an advice that you would love to...
Sure. Yeah, I'd just say, particularly for the men out there, you don't have to suffer alone, right? So there's this thing that is driven into most of us men that are showing emotions as weak. And what I say to those men is, most of the men that I've ever met that kind of have that macho exterior, that deride that kind of feeling, they're actually just afraid. They're afraid of being present with their grief. They're afraid of being present with their fear. They're afraid of being present with some kind of rage they have inside. The pathway to liberation as a man is just to become closer and more intimate with your whole self. And you don't have to do it alone, right? This lone wolf mentality that so many men have driven into them, it doesn't work. It causes men to become lonely, suicidal. And, in nature, the wolf that's kicked out of the pack is the one that dies first. We need community and connection, including men. It doesn't mean we become weak pushover victims or anything. It just means with the support of the right brothers at our side, we can actually get more of what we want in the world. So don't suffer alone. Find a man who can support you.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how a lot they don't know the significant impact of having a system or accountability of a group of people who can keep you on your toes. Honestly, that's, for me, it's more like...
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your favorite quotes and some of the stories. Where can listeners learn more about what you do and check?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about me, men's work, men's groups, you can go to the website of mine, evolutionary.men. So not .com, but .men. And you can learn everything you probably ever wanted to learn about this kind of stuff and some of the different ways we can actually be in the world as men. That's a lot easier. And some of the techniques for actually getting closer to our angst and liberating ourselves and finding other men who can support us.
Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know my listeners will get a ton of value from this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Wisdom.
Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful from this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Contour, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, staying curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.